applying Svadyaya and self-study is now asking yourself, how do I get in contact with that? How do I get in touch with this presence that is greater than me? And how do I utilize my spirit to avoid the world of darkness where, Krishna talks about as this like decaying of knowledge and this slipping into chaos and destruction.
The Yoga Connection with Zorananda is a deep dive into the world of yoga, exploring the rich history of tradition, methodology, and practices both ancient and modern. Follow along as yoga is explored through solo episodes to guest interviews to understand its vast reach around the world.
Hello and welcome to the Yoga Connection. My name is Zorananda, and today we are diving into the fourth niyama of Ashtanga Yoga, Svadyaya. Svadyaya just simply means self-study, and this is one of my favorite to get into. It's the one that I talk about the most in my yoga classes. I feel like it is the most pertinent to advancing as a yogi. And it's the niyama that really sets up all the other ones, because you can't really practice the other yamas and niyamas without some form of self-study. So if you were to look at ahimsa, nonviolence, or satya, truthfulness, if you are wanting to be more truthful and not lie, you're going to have to examine your tendencies. You're going to have to look at why you say and do the things that you do and have an honest assessment of your internal behaviors and qualities. So Svadyaya acts as this kind of lighthouse and this beacon of light to shine on these qualities. But today we're going to look at two main functions of Svadyaya. One being the study of texts, the other being the study of yourself. So the study of texts is through more of like an academic lens, a more of a scholarly lens. You are wanting to learn from individuals who have provided context on certain stories and certain philosophies. Then the second realm of it is the study through practice. So actually applying what these texts say. And the text that I'm going to bring up today on the side of Svadyaya that examines the works of other people, which are, I think, the most notable in the yoga world, are the Upanishads, the Mahabharata, and the Bhagavad Gita. So the Bhagavad Gita comes out of the Mahabharata. So I have some books here with me that I find are the easiest to get and the most prolific, I would say. So especially if you're looking at getting something that is going to be easily digestible, and it's not going to be this huge volume. You're not going to have to pour through thousands of pages, because traditionally and originally the Mahabharata is this like 1800 page epic, and an epic is a poem. So it's this like 1800 page poem that is the history of Bharata, or what we call India. And these like stories that come from ancient Bharat, and there are more like abridged versions and more summarized versions done by people who did a really good job, in my opinion. So there's a copy of the Bhagavad Gita by Barbara Stoller Miller. So this is one that I actually got when I was in university Years ago, I was in philosophy and I was studying Asian philosophies, and I did a course on Asian philosophies where we studied the Bhagavad Gita, we studied the Upanishads, we studied Taoism and Shintoism, and a whole host of different kinds of Asian philosophies. And so through that course, I retained some books, and they were, in my opinion, super concise and quite accurate. I mean, I haven't gone into too many different versions, but for something that um, is unbiased, that's a good start, because there are texts from other people and other scholars that they kind of weave their opinion into it. And I find if you are going to get something that is as objective as possible, you're going to want to get a book that doesn't have the author's opinions. So, like, I have a version of the Bhagavad Gita by Gandhi, and he embeds his opinions into it. And there's another version of the Bhagavad Gita as it is by Prabhupada, and it's the same thing. You find their own mind and their own opinion and their own rationale embedded into it. And you kind of want to avoid those ones because you want to just get the story, you want to get the translation, and you want to be able to derive the wisdom out of it. And that's the whole point of Svadyaya in self-study, is you want to be able to pick up one of these books and get just what the original text was saying and kind of decipher it. But as we'll get into, the point of Svadyaya is to advance your understanding of your place in this life. And you can't really do that on your own. So you can have these books, excuse me, you can have these books and these texts, and you can read them day in and day out. And if you're just trying to figure it out on your own, you might not make sense of it, and you might glean some insights from it, but you really do want a mentor, or you really do want, in this case, a guru who can help decipher what is coming out of it. And if you don't have access to someone like that, there is one option, and there's a version of the Bhagavad Gita by Yogananda, which I think is the best. He does put his insights into it, but it's largely unbiased, and it's refreshing to be able to read the original text and to read the original quotes and stanzas and verses, and then to get a commentary on it where it's quite literally enlightening to read. And whenever I read Yogananda's version, it just always blows my mind. Where when you get into some of the other ones, like from Gandhi and from Prabhupada, that sense of feeling energized isn't really there. And that might just be my own bias. But I've just found by comparing them that there was something different about Yogananda's that wasn't quite there with the others. And so when you're looking at Svadhyaya and you're taking it on as a practice, and you're starting with studying scriptures, and you're studying the texts, you are undergoing an initiation. So you're taking on a responsibility to dive into the world of yoga and what it means to become a practitioner, and what it means to start the process of learning something deeper about yourself. Because what you may not know is that a lot of this information came from a response to the time that the authors or the time that the people were in when the Upanishads were being created, or when the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita were being created, that historically there was a degradation of spirituality. And so noticing at that time that there is a degradation happening, that there needed to be a preservation of some kind of wisdom. There needed to be a preservation of this particular knowledge, and to preserve it in a way that it can last a really long time. Because if you look into the history of the Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata and the Upanishads, these texts are 1,000+ years old or more, especially the Upanishads, right? They go back before into like BCE time. So this is like 2,000+ years ago. And so you have to consider what it would take to preserve that information. And so you'd have to write it in a way that it's going to be specifically impactful. And then you're going to have a following of people who are going to memorize these stanzas and these verses, and to pass it on perfectly from generation to generation. Because originally these texts weren't necessarily written down. They were memorized orally, and a lot of these stanzas actually work with certain mantras, and they work with a kind of like rhythm and a way of speaking it in a kind of a song, so that it's a lot easier to then embed in your memory and into your mind, and so you can carry it forward with you. And these were things that were chanted and rehearsed daily, almost all day, every day, so that the importance of it and the mission of carrying it forward doesn't degrade. Because we know that our memory fails us and our memory degrades over time. So if we're trying to hold on to something precious, we're going to need a practice that enables the maintenance of the memory of these texts. And so these things have been carried forward to our present time, where now we have authors who are doing the work to preserve it further. And that's what I respect about people like Barbara Stoller Miller. I have a book on the Upanishads by Penguin Classics. I don't think it says who the author is. Yeah, I think in this case it's Juan Moscato, and the advisory editor was Betty Radice. And so yeah, I have a version of the Upanishads, translations from the Sanskrit, with an introduction by Juan Moscato. And then the Mahabharata book that I have is by William Buck. And this one is extensive because William Buck had taken the whole volume, the whole 1,800-page epic, and condensed it down to, what does this book have? 400 pages. And so what he found was that the Mahabharata is very repetitive. There's a lot of repeating of certain stories and lines and phrases, and it's obvious why they would do that, especially when they have such a large story to tell, that they're going to be repetitive so that they can really remember it as easy as possible. So what William Buck did as a service to all of his practitioners is condense it into a summarized version where it's a chronological flow, and it goes from the beginning to the end, tells the whole story without repeating itself. Because I only have an hour to do things, it's a bit difficult to try to get into all of these volumes. So what I would recommend is looking these up. I'll have links in description of the books, and to purchase them yourselves or find them online. Sometimes you can find PDF versions of these online for free, but it's so worth to get into. But what I can do is just kind of go into Barbara Stoller Miller's version of the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads and just kind of read what, these ancient stories and these ancient mystics were propounding way back then, and how it comes to fruition now in our modern day, right? That we're blessed to have this opportunity to have access to this information and utilize it in our practice. All right, so the Bhagavad Gita is a story of Krishna and Arjuna, and Arjuna is a warrior who is a part of this royal family, and the royal family is split into two factions. And one faction is this very large part of his family, and the other faction is this smaller group that is his direct family. So the other side, which is this large faction, is like his cousins and like distant family. And the Bhagavad Gita starts in a courtroom, and the two families are arguing against like land titlement. And this large family, because they're growing so big and they're expanding, they're wanting to take land from this like smaller part of the family, which Arjuna is a part of, and I think his 12 brothers. And they're in court arguing this, and it kind of comes to a stalemate. And this large family's like, well, if you don't agree to our terms, we're just going to attack you, and we're just going to take it. And this is where Krishna comes in and basically creates these terms for the two families, and it eventually leads to war, because the larger family's like, you know what, we don't agree to this, we're just gonna go to war. I've got, like, there's hundreds and hundreds of us, and my army is large, and we'll just win. And Krishna goes, okay, well, you can either what does he say? So he like offers his service, and the large family's like, we don't even need you, like, we're huge. And so Krishna goes like, okay, I'm gonna go on the side of Arjuna. And then essentially the battle begins without the larger family really knowing, until Krishna exposes himself as this like great cosmic being. Because like they agree that, okay, Krishna's going to go on to the side, and then Krishna goes, okay, well, this is who I really am. And the other family's like, holy shit, what have we done? But they go to war, and anyways, but the whole story is around Arjuna not being able to accept his position as a warrior, because he's this infamous archer. And so there's this scene where the war has started. He's sitting on top of a hill with Krishna, and Krishna is driving this chariot with horses, and they have like the buggy in the back, and Arjuna's in it. And Arjuna is just lamenting, because when he looks across the field and he looks at where the battle is, he sees his gurus, he sees his mentors, he sees his cousins, he sees his family from the other side. And then the whole discourse happens in understanding what his role is in being the warrior. And it's all about karma yoga. It's all about surrendering yourself to your life path. And it's a beautiful story. And like the whole point of it is to encourage you to understand what your position is in this world and how to lean into your karma and to fulfill your karma even when there's resistance. And this is the whole important point of Svadyaya and self study, that you're diving into these texts and they're showing and reflecting to you what it is that you can do in your life now and how relevant it is. So even though this story is taking place and it had been written, a couple thousand years ago, that the authors of these texts, they knew how to carry forward relevancy, so that even through the ages, even now to our modern age where we have all this like crazy technology, if we were to compare where we are now and what we have to life in India 2,000 years ago, there's this huge stark difference, but there is a relevancy that carries forward. There's still the human condition where we are up against what our dharma and what our karma is. And so the Bhagavad Gita just beautifully iterates what it takes to face your karma and to live your dharma. So I'm just going to read one passage that kind of speaks to this. And this is, a good exercise and a good example of how you can utilize Svadyaya and you can understand self-study and how you can derive relevant truths from these passages. So what I like about Barbara Stoller Miller's is there's no commentary. There aren't any of her own words. It's just the passages translated from Sanskrit to English. And so I've just opened up to a random page. It's like page 50, 51. It's the fourth teaching. This one's about knowledge. So Lord Krishna says, I taught this undying discipline to the shining sun, first of mortals, who told it to Manu, the progenitor of man. Manu told it to the solar king Ikshvaku. Royal sages knew this discipline, which the tradition handed down, but over the course of time it has decayed, Arjuna. This is the ancient discipline that I have taught to you today. You are my devotee and my friend, and this is the deepest mystery. So right there, he's saying that a potent truth of life and of existence is being passed down, and that Krishna has been this forebearer of knowledge right from the beginning. But there is this degradation that happens, and there's this decaying that happens inevitably, and he kind of returns to maintain that potency, and he's chosen Arjuna to be this like next forebearer of ancient wisdom, and that Arjuna has to overcome the challenge of his mortality and his like fight against his role in this war, to be able to see the duty that he has in not only being a warrior, but also being this like conduit for wisdom. So Arjuna asks, your birth followed the birth of the sun. How can I comprehend that you taught it in the beginning? Lord Krishna says, I have passed through many births, and so have you. I know them all, but you do not, Arjuna. Though myself unborn, undying, the Lord of creatures, I fashion nature, which is mine, and I come into being through my own magic. Whenever sacred duty decays, the chaos prevails. Then I create myself, Arjuna, to protect men of virtue and destroy men who do evil. To set the standard of sacred duty, I appear in age after age. He who really knows my divine birth and my action escapes rebirth when he abandons the body, and he comes to me, Arjuna, free from attraction, fear, and anger, filled with me, dependent on me, purified by the fire of knowledge. Many come into my presence. As they seek refuge in me, I devote myself to them, Arjuna. Men retrace my path in every way. Desiring success in their actions, men sacrifice here to the gods in the world of man. Success comes quickly from action. I created mankind in four classes, different in their qualities and actions. Though unchanging, I am the agent of this, the actor who never acts. And he goes on. And it's just a side note. It's really interesting hearing that passage and how it's even relevant today, where whenever there's an increase of chaos and destruction, that there's this potency that's being created to balance out that kind of force, right? And so, Krishna is directly saying, whenever the world gets chaotic, I come back into play, and then I bring balance to what chaos is ensuing and what evil is ensuing. And we're kind of seeing that in our world today, and the wars that are happening through Ukraine and through Russia, and especially through Israel and Palestine and Iran now, that there is this very noticeable increase in the will of destruction. And, even in Abrahamic religions, there is this prophecy where whenever there's the oncoming apocalypse in Armageddon, that there's a coming of a Messiah. So even in the Bhagavad Gita, there is this sense of a prophecy that a figure is going to appear to balance out the carnage and the chaos and the evil that is happening. And so what the question is then, like, what wisdom can come out of that? Like, what in your own life does that make sense? And this is the nature of Svadyaya, so that when you read something like that and you can see the relevancy over time, that even in your own life personally, when you start to go downhill and things start to become chaotic in your own life, and things aren't going well, and you're making poor decisions, you're making mistakes, that there's a choice to be made, that all of that self-sabotage and all of that chaos can lead to self-destruction, or you realize that you are being pushed in a direction to see the value of the opposite, and to see the value of then wanting to encourage yourself to go into the light of kind of resurrecting a goodness within you. And this is a typical experience. This is the hero's journey, right? I think the author is like Joseph Smith. And you can find all kinds of interviews all over the internet of people who hit rock bottom in some sense and found this incredible hope inside of themselves that they can come out of it and be a beacon of light for others. You hear this in stories of people who've been in prison for decades, or had a near-death experience, or overdosed on drugs, or were criminals, or you name it. Like, there are people who went through some kind of ordeal and then have come out of it. And Svadhyaya is there in those moments. The self-study is there in those moments where they've gone through this trial and this initiation, and they come out of it and they go, this is what happened in my life. If I'm to continue living and to continue thriving and to avoid a negative lifestyle, I have to make this decision to go in this direction and to use my story as a way to encourage and educate people to avoid those things and to live a better life. And so then this is the benefit of reading these kind of texts, that it's going to bring a refreshing insight on who you are as a person. And that's just one book. That's just the Bhagavad Gita, right? There's so many more. So say if we're to look at the Upanishads, and the Upanishads are interesting because Upanishad means to sit at the feet of um, like your mentor, your teacher. And so the Upanishads were actually a response coming from the Vedas, because in India there's a separation of classes, and they say they don't have this now, but they still do. It's just not so it's not so like used by the government. It's because they're trying to adapt in a democratic way. But originally, there were four classes of people. There were the untouchables. There were the farmers and the business people. There were the warriors, and then there were the Brahmins. And so, at the time of the writing of the Vedas and the utilization of the Vedas, over time there was this like corruption, and it's just like what Krishna was talking about, right? Like there's this decay of knowledge, because originally with the classes, the Brahmins would be the ones that would go to families and examine the children and basically put them in the classes. So they would see if a child has a proclivity to reading and writing and spiritual, and have like a spiritual sense, and that would become a Brahmin. If there's one that's like more athletic and loves sports and loves acrobatics, then they would be put in like the warrior class. And then one that is more humble and loves plants and animals, then they'd be put into the farming. And then there was the ones that like didn't care about anything and were kind of dullards and were felt kind of useless. They'd become the untouchables. And what started to happen is that the Brahmin class were able to have families, and they started to pick their own children to be in the Brahmin class, even if that child didn't have any proclivity towards some of the qualities of the Brahmins. If it was like, more spiritual adeptness and prayer and mantra and writing and scholarly aspects, that they would have a child that would want to be a warrior or wanting to be athletic, but then they would make him a Brahmin. And so there were then a group of Brahmins who saw this, and they did not agree with it. And it's right in the time of collapse, right? So right when things are becoming chaotic because there's this corruption that's happening, right? And it's all kind of fueled by somewhat the Brahmin class, where they are negating the tradition of finding and utilizing a more honest approach to filling these classes. That then a group of Brahmins left, and then they exiled themselves, and they're like, you know what, we don't agree with this, and we're going to start our own thing. And then that's where Vedanta came into play, and then the Upanishads. And so then the Upanishad is sitting at the feet of this kind of like new teacher, and they would then continue the original Brahmin sense of finding children who were adept to spiritual proclivities. And they would get the agreement from their parents, like, hey, we're going to take your child, we're going to bring him to this school. We have created these gurukals in the jungle and in the foothills, and we're going to teach your child how to become a Brahmin and how to become one of these like yogic scholars, so that they can pass on the information. And they would take him from the age of 8 up until the age of 18, and then they can go back into the world, and they still have access to their family and stuff like that. It's not like kidnapping or anything. And that is still prevalent in India. Like that is what happened with my teacher, Yogrishi Vishvaketu, that his uncle, Yogi Raj, I believe his name is, he has a Gurukul in near Rishikesh, I believe. And so when Vishnuji was a young boy, he wanted to go when he was 6 years old, but He had to wait till he was 8, and then he lived in this Gurukul until he was, I think, like 18, and became a yoga master, a Himalayan yoga master. Got his PhD, and so it's still alive and well in India. There's still that practice of finding children, and Vishwaji had a from birth proclivity towards yoga and spirituality. When I interviewed him, just look for my interview with Yoga Rishi Vishvaketu. It's really interesting. So I asked him, how did you get into yoga? And he looked at me and he's like, "Oh, I didn't get into yoga." And that surprised me. I was like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "This body was made with yoga. This body was born with yoga. It was already programmed in, and it has been running since I was born." And I was taken aback by that. I'd never really considered it that way, that there's something about our existence that we just have no idea about, and that there are, I want to use the word programs. There are things embedded in our body, and there's programs already set in place that turn on at certain points. And for him, it turned on the moment he was born. For me, it turned on when I was 18 or 19. For some people, it turns on when they're 50. And so there's this interesting idea that in our genetics and in our DNA and in our body, that there are these implemented programs. How they get there, I have no idea, but it's evident more and more that our DNA holds these programs and these proclivities that get activated. That was a little bit of a rant, but so getting back to the Upanishads. So like my teacher would be considered an Upanishad kind of person, right? Where you're sitting at the feet of a teacher or a guru, and they're expounding the teachings that they've carried forth over the years. And so there are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 Upanishads. So let's look at the first one. So the Isa or Isha Upanishad says, "Behold the universe in the glory of God, and all that lives and moves on earth. Leaving the transient, find joy in the eternal. Set not your heart on another's possession. Working thus, a man may wish for a life of 100 years. Only actions done in God bind not the soul of man. There are demon-haunted worlds, regions of utter darkness. Whoever in life denies the spirit falls into that darkness of death. The spirit, without moving, is swifter than the mind. The senses cannot reach him. He is ever beyond them. Standing still, he overtakes those who run. The ocean of his being, the spirit of life, leads the streams of actions. He moves, and he moves not. He is far, and he is near. He is within all, and he is outside all." So even in the very first Upanishad, immediately it's going into some kind of origin. It's going into a belief and an understanding of a being greater than you. It's going into realms that you should avoid, and it's going into the nature of spirit that is pervasive. And so right off the bat, there's an initiation into a spiritualized sense of what and who we are, and the connection that we have to the world around us. And so applying Svadyaya and self-study is now asking yourself, how do I get in contact with that? How do I get in touch with this presence that is greater than me? And how do I utilize my spirit to avoid the world of darkness where, Krishna talks about as this like decaying of knowledge and this slipping into chaos and destruction. How do I avoid that? And how do I get in touch with this spirit that is essentially omnipresent, where it's near and far and here and there and within and without all things? Yeah, so just looking through more of the Upanishads, it really seems like, yeah, this is very much an origin story teaching. Where was that? So just looking at the Mandukya Upanishad, right? Om, this eternal word is all. What was, what is, and what shall be, and what beyond is eternity. All is Om. Brahman is all, and Atman is Brahman. Atman, the self, has four conditions. The first condition is the waking of life, outward moving consciousness, enjoying the seven outer gross elements. The second condition is the dreaming life of inner moving consciousness, enjoying the seven subtle inner realms, elements, and its own light and solitude. The third condition is the sleeping life of silent consciousness, when a person has no desires and beholds no dreams. That condition of deep sleep is one of oneness, a mass of silent consciousness made of peace and enjoying peace. The silent consciousness is all-powerful, all-knowing, the inner ruler, the source of all, the beginning and end of all beings. The fourth condition is Atman in his own pure state, the awakening of supreme consciousness. It is neither outer nor inner consciousness, neither semi-consciousness nor sleeping consciousness, neither consciousness nor unconsciousness. He is Atman, the spirit himself, that cannot be seen or touched, that is above all distinction, beyond thought and ineffable. In the union with him is the supreme proof of his reality. He is the end of evolution and non-duality. He is peace and love. So, personally, I think that's actually quite powerful, right? To have these texts that are speaking on this trajectory of our experience of consciousness. And to think that this teaching and these texts are 1,000+ years old, 2,000 years old. And so to have had this kind of understanding, to me, indicates that there is a sophistication and that there was an advancement in understanding life and understanding the world that is not hindered by a perceived primitive sense of our ancestry. So if we were to look back 1,000 years, what do we think? Oh, cavemen people, medieval people, people that fought with swords and used shields and rode around on horses and built things out of wood and stone, and there's absolutely no technology. But then you read something like this and you're like, that is profound. So how do we have this view of our ancestry and our, past of being primitive people, and yet they're writing stuff like this? And that to me just indicates that there is something lost in the translation of our history, and there was a sense of sophistication of philosophy and knowledge and wisdom that wasn't hindered by the lack of technology that we have today. And so it's really interesting to me that we can have access to these books and begin to get in touch with what exactly they've been talking about in a pure sense. And this is why I like yoga, and this is why I like these texts a little bit more than our traditional religions. I find that in the Bibles, especially the Abrahamic religions, it's very cryptic and it's very allegory based, and it's very much unnecessarily dogmatic, where um, when you read these texts and you go into yoga, there isn't there isn't an institution that's telling you what you can't do or what you shouldn't do necessarily. Though you have the yamas and niyamas that are kind of your do's and don'ts, but there isn't a figurehead there that um is necessarily responsible for how you receive the information. You're going to have your guru, you're going to have your teacher, but that's a personalized figure. Where, say, in the Catholic Church or um, in a Muslim church, whatever, you're going to have the imam, you're going to have the priest, you're going to have the bishop, you're going to have the rabbi who is largely gatekeeping the deeper truths and only really giving sermon based on what they want to expound to you in that day. Where a lot of these texts from India and these yogic texts, they're just laying it all out. They're saying, here's all of it, go study it and figure it out and find a guru who can like unpack this stuff with you. And of course there's going to be a process, right? The example that I give when I'm considering deeper spiritual truths is the comparison between a kindergartner or someone in elementary school and a university student. If you're teaching someone mathematics, you're not going to start by teaching high level calculus to a 6-year-old. Like, sure, you can show them the formulas and you can be like, okay, this is how you get from using this formula. This is how you put in the numbers and this is how you get this number. Anybody can learn that, but they're not going to understand the reason for it because high level calculus and functions is basically rocket science. Like you're using high level calculus to understand the function of something all along the way that the trajectory, and they use really specific calculus for rocket science. So sure, you can show someone the formulas and tell them how to plug in the numbers to how to get this number at the end, but they're not going to understand why they're doing it. And that's why you start with the basics. You start with 1 + 1 is 2, 2 + 2 is 4, and so on. And then you build the knowledge up to the point where when they're in university and you're showing them high level calculus and physics, then they go, oh, okay, well, I'm putting in these numbers for this particular reason because the number that I'm going to get at the end is for this function. And that's really no different than spiritual truths. So if you're new to the yoga practice, you're new to the spiritual path, yes, you have the book that's going to tell you that Atman, Brahman is Atman and Atman is Brahman and all is one and everything. Yeah, okay. That is the formula. And you can read that out and you can go, okay, well, Brahman is Atman, Atman is Brahman. Everything is one and one is everything. Om Purnamida, Purnamida, Purnam, Purnamudachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnamabhishyate. Like, yeah, you can be given that. That is the mantra for this, but you can recite that all you want, but if you're not given the translation, you're not given the truth of that, and you're not at a higher level, you're not going to understand it. You know, like that mantra is all is complete. The complete is all. The all and the complete are together, and the together is oneness, right? So you can know that, but the higher levels of it is unpacking it, is understanding it as a mathematical truth, is understanding it as a philosophy, that it's not just a jumble of words. And so this is where Svadyaya now goes into the realm of personal practice, because now you want to take these texts, you want to take the Bhagavad Gita, you want to take the Upanishads, you want to take now the Hatha Yoga Pradipika and apply these teachings into a daily practice paired with movement paired with breath work, because the knowledge that you're taking in, you're putting it into your vessel. And if your vessel is clogged up, so to speak, if your vessel is filled with impurities, is temperamental and full of anger and resentment, that knowledge is just going to be corrupted and corroded. The knowledge is going to come into you. You're going to have all these filters that it's going to pass through, and it's going to be lost. And so the yoga practice now, in the Svadyaya of your asana practice, your pranayama practice, is that you are then opening and clearing your vessel so that when this knowledge and wisdom comes in, it has a place to grow in. Just think about if you are soil, and in your soil are seeds of weeds, and you are trying to plant seeds of these beautiful flowers, but the weeds grow 10 times faster. And so you've been growing a garden inside of you of all these noxious weeds. And some of them are very deceptive. Some weeds look like regular plants. And so you're looking at all these weeds and you're going, oh, these look pretty beautiful. And you just keep them there. But the roots of those weeds are pulling all the nutrients. They're pulling all the goodness out of you. And you're depleting yourself, and you don't know it because those plants don't give to you, they only take. So you got to think your resentments, your insecurities, your negative behaviors, your negative thoughts, your addictions, your lies, all of these qualities of your behaviors that are going to be harmful to you and harmful to others are these weeds. And they're taking in all the energy from you, and they're not giving back to you, and you're being depleted. So if you have this storehouse of weeds inside of you, and now you're trying to open yourself up to take on this information and this knowledge, you are not going to last. You're going to read stuff from the Bhagavad Gita, from the Upanishads, just like what I said, and you're just going to drop it. You're going to hear it. It's going to be profound for a second. And you're going to be like, oh, well, I don't want to do anything with it. That's the weeds talking. Those are the noxious plants. Those are the tendencies. Those are the addictions. Those are the negativities that want to prevent you from picking out the weeds, clearing out your soils, and planting new beneficial plants that are going to actually give to you. Even though they're going to need the nutrients to grow, these plants are going to bear fruit. They're going to bear vegetables. They're going to bear flowers that are edible and that they attract beneficial pollinators, right? So this is all metaphor, but to make room for this knowledge to actually settle and have an impact on you, you need to do the practice. And this is what I find interesting about scholars, like academics and people in religion, is that they invest so much time in filling their mind with stuff, but they don't have an actual spiritual practice. They don't have a physical practice where they're doing asana and pranayama. And you can see in them that the information that they have isn't turning into wisdom. They're just regurgitating a lot of knowledge. And so they slowly become arrogant and they become dismissive and they become argumentative and rude about their approach to this information. And I've seen that in universities. I've spent time with a lot of professors, and though they know how to speak about this stuff, it becomes evident that they're not actually at all living what is in these texts. And it's just their job to present the material, and that's it. And they don't actually take on the teachings of it. And so that's what caused me to decide not to even be in academics anymore. I'm like, I can't, in the heart of hearts of myself, want to take on these practices, but learn it from someone who has no interest in the actual practice of it, that it's just a job for them. And so for me personally, as someone who's going to expound this information, I need to take on the practices, and I need to actually look at how this information and this wisdom is being integrated into me. And it's being done so through not only the self-study of text and scripture, but it's also done through practice as well, where I'm looking at now the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and I'm looking at the I think it's Samhita Garanda, and a lot of like Bihar books. So there's this really prolific guru named Shivananda, and he has the Bihar school, and they have this whole library of books, and this is where the Hatha Yoga Pradipika comes out of. And another book, they have like Tantra books, Kundalini books, and Prana and Pranayama books that are really, really great. And I find that the Hatha Yoga Pradipika is just the gem of the yoga world. And in fact, the one that you can get now from the Bihar school is a composition of 20 different versions of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. So it's just like similar to what William Buck did. That I have it here. So this version of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika that I have from Bihar was put together by Swami Mukti Bodhananda. So it's this woman from Australia that did this back in 1985. And it was under the guidance of Swami Satyananda Saraswati, and in dedication to Swami Shivananda Saraswati. And it's amazing. It has everything about the Hatha Yoga practice, everything about the traditional 82 postures, about all the different kinds of pranayama, mudras, different forms of meditation, about the chakras, kriya practices, you name it. It is the full discourse of the Hatha Yoga practice. And so if I were to recommend, just as like a starter package, if you're at the point where you've been going to yoga studios and you've been practicing and you're like, hey, now I want to go deeper, it would be the Bhagavad Gita by Barbara Stroller Miller. It would be the Penguins Classic version of the Upanishads. It would be the Mahabharata by William Buck. And then the Hatha Yoga Pradipika by Swami Mukti Bodhananda. Again, I'm going to have links in the description. Luckily, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika is free online. You can get a PDF version of it. I'm not too sure if you can get PDF versions. I'll look for it. I'm at the 1 hour mark, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper into the practice. So again, went extensively into the self-study through scripture and finding the ones that are going to be the most profound, which I talked about. And then now going into the physical practice and the spiritual practice, utilizing what will be the next phase of Ashtanga yoga. So I have one more niyama to go into next. That's Ishvara Paranidhana, which is the most important. So I've said all of them are important, but this is the most important one. It's the thing that every text, no matter what, goes into, is saying, in order to have a successful practice that gets you in touch with something greater than yourself, you need Ishvara Pranidhana. I'm not going to go into that just yet. applying a spiritual practice with Svadyaya and self study is that now you're not relying on text, you're not relying on the words and the stories and the allegories of someone else. Now you are relying on your own ability to observe what is happening within you when you are doing the practices. So, when you're doing your asana practice, when you're doing your movement practice, when you're doing pranayama and breathing and you're getting into meditation, while you are practicing, you are observing, you are actively observing. So it's not just that you go into the posture and you hold it and you just sit there and you think about the meal that you ate the night before, or you think about the hockey game that's on, or you think you are 100% investing in what is happening to your body in that moment. Everything else is shut off. You are tuning everything out and you are examining what's happening with the muscles, what's happening with the joints, what's happening with the tendons, what's happening with your organs, what's happening with your endocrine system, your nervous system. So when you're in the posture and it's feeling that way, why does it feel that way? You dive deep into it and there's an unraveling that occurs. So in the unraveling, there is a release of information. And so your body communicates to you through sensation. Think of the posture as a way of your body talking to you. And it talks to you through sensation. And how you talk back is not with the words in your mind. When a sensation comes up, you don't go, oh, what is that? Why are you doing that? You respond back with breath. And the communication is nonverbal, but it is telepathic. You are telepathically communicating with your body through the exchange of sensation from whatever is happening in your nervous system, in your muscles, in your body, through the breath. So then a sensation comes up, you take a deep inhale, you accentuate the sensation, because when you inhale, you naturally tighten. So if you're in a posture like Ardha Matsyendrasana, so it's the seated twist, okay? And usually you'll straighten one leg, you have your other leg crossed over the knee and you're twisting. But this time, the straightened leg, you bend and you bring your foot next to your hip and things tighten. In that moment, as you're in the twist, you take a deep inhale into your belly and expand. And in that expanse and in that tightness, it's showing you where you can create room. And so how you create room is you inhale as deep as you can, expand past your boundary, so that when you exhale, you can exhale everything out, squeeze all the breath out. And as soon as you squeeze the breath out, that is where you can twist deeper, you can lengthen, and the room is created. And in that exchange, the communication that is happening that's completely nonverbal is that you are telling your body through these actions how to cleanse itself. Because in Ardha Matsyendrasana, the important thing is that it's not just about twisting the spine and getting into the muscles and getting into connector tissues, is that you are massaging your organs. So when you inhale, you are pressing your diaphragm down, you are expanding your belly, you're squeezing all the organs together and creating space. Then when you exhale, you actively squeeze the organs in, and it's as if they're sponges, and you're squeezing the organs out and then you're twisting. And so if you were to do that breath after breath after breath after breath, you start to create this communication and this connection with the body, that when you're in that posture and when you're breathing in that way, that whatever impurities are in the organs and in the body in that moment can be flushed out. And you train your body to accept this. And so this is now the deeper levels of Svadyaya in the practice. And it unravels more and more because now you can go into pranayama and you can go into breath work. Okay. So you've done a bit of a physical practice. Now you're going to start to do some breath work. And that breath work is you're now creating a new level of understanding of communication between the exchange of prana. So that when you're doing something like Kapalabhati, Bhastrika, Jayakriya, I'm doing a 21-day pranayama challenge right now on my Instagram. So go check that out because I've just done 11 days worth or 12 days worth. And I've been diving into Bhastrika and Kapalabhati. So that'll directly show you what those practices look like. And now the communication is between the subtlety of your awareness. And again, this is all telepathic, and not telepathic in the sense of, oh, I'm trying to talk to something. Telepathic between your body and you are becoming aware of an exchange of prana between the world around you and inside of you. And you start to see that there is no difference when you are inhaling and exhaling, because we're so focused on our superficial sense of our desires and who we are and what we're doing. Our breathing is just so unconscious and it's so autonomic. We're not thinking about what is happening. And so the pranayama practice is now taking that unconscious autonomic sense of our breath, bringing it right to the forefront of our mind. And we are now exercising consciousness and awareness more somatically of what the breath is. And I say this all the time, pranayama doesn't mean breath work. Pranayama means the control of life force. Think about it, yama, right? There's the yamas and niyamas. Yama means restraint. Niyama means non-restraint. So yama, in the sense of Ashtanga yoga and the yama and niyamas, the yamas are the restraints of life. What things that you want to avoid doing. Niyamas, non-restraints, the things that you want to do. So prana yama is the restraint or control of life force. Prana means life force. So when I'm sitting there doing Kapalabhati, inhaling and exhaling strongly through my nose, inhaling passively through my nose, pulsing my belly, the breath work is the catalyst for the control of prana. And control in this sense is the activation of awareness, that you are controlling your consciousness, controlling your awareness and your focus on the exchange of life force, and how when you do these techniques, that you're changing the way that your body functions. You're changing your brainwave states. So right now in beta wave state, and we know this is scientifically provable, that right now our brainwave state is beta. That is our waking conscious state. It's constant beta, fluctuates here and there, can go into alpha until we go into sleep states where it goes into delta and theta and REM. But in our waking life, we're in beta. Pranayama changes the brainwave state. It starts to shift us into alpha and, to the most extreme, gamma. And so pranayama isn't just breath work. The breath work is the catalyst to change our brainwave to alpha and gamma, so that we can be very perceptible of the prana that is all around us, within us, and pervasive. And so now, considering self-study in the practice sense with pranayama, you are applying your awareness to study how prana moves. So now you go from using the physical practice and the asana to clear things out by using the twist and using the breath and using all these postures, the sun salutations and so on, to tone and work your body to prepare yourself so that when you do the pranayama, now you have the sensitivity. Now your nervous system is open. Now your body is open. All those weeds that were there have all been removed. And now you have planted these new seeds to become aware, to bear the fruit of connection with divinity. And then now you're moving into the meditation part, the dharana, dhyana, samadhi, which we'll get into a little bit later. We're still a few episodes away from there. But you can kind of see the trajectory here of what the yoga practice is doing, from the self-study of scriptures to get you inspired to read these amazing words, to be like, oh, I can get in contact with something deeper to myself. How do I do it? Boom. Yoga practice comes in. Okay, here's how you do it. Sit in these postures. Do this work with your body. Learn something from it. Don't just sit in a posture and then get out of it immediately. Sit. That's why even in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, it's suggesting that you work up to sitting in a posture for 3 hours. And this is what these ancient yogis did. They were recluse. They left society. They lived in the mountains. They lived in the forest. And they said, screw this. I'm going to go figure this stuff out. And you sit and breathe and experience what you've done to your body, why all the tension is there, how to unravel it. So once that unraveling occurs and you can come into full lotus and you can sit, now the next stage of work begins. Doing the pranayama, doing the breath work, doing the amplification of sensitivity, so that the next line of work can happen, where you are then diving into the pranic fields. You're diving into the etheric sense of yourself, that it's no longer about the body. The body is taken care of. You've cleaned it out. You've planted the new seeds. It's bearing the fruit. Now it's time to go into the very essence of what makes that fruit. I'm going to leave it there. I hope this all makes sense. Sometimes I feel like I ramble. Sometimes I feel like I'm downloading things. Sometimes I feel like I'm really in a flow. This time it really felt like I was in a good flow. And, I look forward to putting out these episodes each week. Sometimes there's delays, but I'm doing my best to stay on top of these things. So I really want to grow. Not only put this out as audio, but make videos. And that's it for me today. The next episode will be the last niyama, Ishvari Pranidhana. Get into the final limbs of Ashtanga yoga. With that, have a wonderful rest of your day. Enjoy.